In the shadows of history, as the fires of war devoured fields and cities, nature stood unmoved, cold and eternal. It chose no side, cared nothing for the flags or ideals humans raised high. But don't mistake its silence for mercy. The frozen forests, rugged hills, and wild creatures lurking in the dark were always ready to deliver a bitter truth. On this planet, humans are not always the masters. This is the story of the wolf, not just a predator with razor-sharp teeth, but a symbol of brutal survival, clashing with humanity in its darkest hours, when war and nature conspired to test the limits of mankind. Picture a forest in Eastern Europe, 1907, amid the blood-soaked divide of World War I. The Eastern Front was a frozen hell where Russian and German soldiers huddled in shallow trenches, hastily dug into ground hard as stone. Temperatures plummeted below 30°C, so cold that breath turned to mist, and the chatter of teeth mingled with the blast of grenades. Soldiers, hands trembling as they clutched M1911s or Mausers, fought not only their enemies but a bone-chilling cold that sliced through flesh. Yet, in the dead of night, something more terrifying than gunfire emerged. A chilling, drawn-out sound cut through the fog, piercing the hearts of even the toughest men. The howl of wolves. It wasn't the bark of a dog or the whistle of wind through trees. It was nature's declaration of war. A warning that the darkness did not belong to humans. Jake Hawk Thompson, a 28-year-old American sergeant volunteering with the Allies, wasn't easily shaken. With sun-bleached blonde hair and a reckless grin, he'd survived the slaughter at the Somme, where shells fell like rain and bodies piled high. Jake was the kind of guy you wanted in the trenches, quick, fearless, and always ready with a joke to ease the tension. If I made it through that meat grinder in France, these Eastern European mutts ain't nothing, he scoffed, chewing gum, the only thing tying him to his Ohio home. When grizzled Russian veterans whispered of ghost wolf packs, massive, ravenous beasts said to hunt humans, Jake brushed it off as tales to scare green recruits. He'd heard plenty of wild stories in the ranks, vampires in Transylvania, UFOs in Nevada. These old-timers probably watch too many Hollywood flicks, he quipped to Mike "Doc" Sullivan, the field medic and his closest friend. But Mike's uneasy glance, hardened by strange claw marks he'd seen on German corpses, sent a shiver through Jake. That night, the forest fell unnaturally still. Gunfire dwindled as if both sides were too exhausted to continue. Jake, standing watch at the camp's edge, checked his M1911, fingers numb in tattered gloves. The moonless sky offered only the faint glow of his night vision scope, which he cursed under his breath for its dying battery. Typical army budget cuts nonsense. He tried to focus but couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Somewhere in the darkness among snow-laden trees, something moved. A shadow darted past, so fast Jake wasn't sure he'd seen it. He told himself it was the wind, maybe a stray rabbit. But then the howl rose again, closer now, sharp as a blade. It wasn't one wolf, it was many, their cries weaving into a deadly chorus, as if the entire forest had awakened to hunt. Jake wasn't superstitious. Raised in a small town where folks believed in God, football, and heirloom shotguns, he trusted what he could see and shoot. But that night, as the howls echoed through the valley, he felt a primal fear no M16 or grenade could dispel. He recalled a story a Russian veteran shared by the fire about super wolf packs, starving wolves banding together in brutal winters, ready to tear apart anything that moved, human or not. "You think it's nonsense?" Mike had asked, voice low. "I've seen paw prints big as my hand. Not dogs, not bears, something bigger." Jake had laughed, dubbing Mike the MRE zoologist, a jab at the awful field rations the platoon despised. But now, alone in the dark, the humor was gone. The forest came alive in a way Jake had never seen. Rustling leaves, snapping twigs, and soft but steady footsteps. He gripped his pistol, breath forming white clouds. Suddenly, from the German trenches half a mile away, a scream tore through the night. It wasn't the cry of a soldier shot. It was a wail of absolute terror, as if someone were being ripped apart. Jake's blood ran cold. He wanted to sprint back to camp, alert the platoon, but his feet felt nailed to the ground. The howls rose again, so close he felt their vibrations in his chest. And then, in the dim glow of his night vision scope, he saw them. Pairs of glowing yellow eyes, glinting behind the trees, like hellfire advancing. That night, Jake Thompson, who once thought he feared only artillery, learned that war wasn't just a human struggle. Other enemies lurked in the shadows, wearing no uniforms, following no rules. They were the embodiment of wild nature, and they were hungry. Jake's story is just the beginning, a chapter in a long saga of humanity's clash with wolves, a war with no peace treaty, where the victor isn't always the one holding a gun. Wolves are not merely wild creatures roaming deep forests. They are the embodiment of survival, nature's warriors forged through millennia of evolution. Intelligent, united, and ruthless, they live by strict social codes rivaling a Marine platoon gearing up for its deadliest mission. An average wolf pack numbers just 6, but don't let that fool you. With razor-sharp hunting tactics and terrifying strength, they can bring down a moose weighing a ton, twice a man's height, with a few precise bites. A wolf's bite force exceeds 1,200 psi, enough to crush a prey's femur in 6 snaps, like splintering dry wood. Compare that to a human skull. Just 500 psi seals the deal. In nature's darkness, wolves aren't just predators. They are nightmares. Jake Hawk Thompson, an American sergeant with a reckless grin and eyes sharp as a blade, wasn't one to buy into horror stories. He'd seen enough on the battlefield, from the artillery storms of the Somme to the freezing nights of Eastern Europe. But sitting around a fire in a frost-bitten forest in 1917, listening to Mike "Doc" Sullivan, his best friend and field medic, talk about wolves, Jake felt a chill unrelated to the weather. Mike, with a voice steady as a casualty report, described the wolf's terrifying sense of smell. Can you sniff a burger from an In-N-Out a mile away? A wolf can track prey from a mile and a half, even against the wind. Jake shrugged, trying to keep his cool, but the image of a beast locking onto him from that distance unnerved him. He was used to facing German soldiers through the sights of his M1911, but an invisible enemy hunting by instinct was something else entirely. Wolves don't hunt just for hunger. They are strategists, moving like a spec ops team in the dark. When a pack spots prey, they don't charge blindly. They encircle, patient, splitting into pairs to cut off escape routes. Attacks target the face and legs, the prey's weakest points. Razor-sharp teeth tear through flesh, blood spraying onto white snow. The most horrifying part, they don't wait for the prey to stop breathing. As the animal collapses, still writhing in desperation, the pack rips into its guts, devouring the liver and soft belly fat, the choicest parts, while the victim's heart still beats. Jake once thought Mike was exaggerating, spicing up the tale to distract from their bland MREs. But that night, patrolling the camp's edge, Jake saw a pair of glowing yellow eyes glinting behind the trees. His heart pounded like he'd just been told LZ's hot in enemy territory. Those eyes weren't just hungry. They were sizing him up like a sniper picking an angle. Wolves don't just hunt to survive. They are territorial guardians, ready to fight to the death against any intruder. A pack can control up to 50 square miles, marking boundaries with howls and scent, sending a clear warning. Cross this line, and you pay. But when winter arrives, bringing bone-chilling cold and blizzards that bury prey tracks, wolves turn semi-nomadic. They roam thousands of square miles, traversing desolate forests and frozen valleys, chasing deer, rabbits, or anything still alive. When food grows scarce, when livestock are slaughtered and deer vanish, wolves have no choice. Humans, undefended villages, trenches filled with exhausted soldiers, become targets. Jake once heard a Russian veteran speak of villages wiped out, where wolves didn't just kill cattle but dragged children from their beds. He'd laughed, calling it a Slavic fairy tale, but the veteran's hollow, haunted eyes stuck with him. In that Eastern European forest where Jake and his platoon were camped, wolves were more than a threat. They were a reminder that nature never sides with humans. They wore no uniforms, honored no ceasefires. They needed no maps or compasses to navigate the fog. With keen senses, terrifying strength, and the intelligence of a trained army, wolves were perfect predators. Jake, who once thought war was the only thing to fear, began to realize some enemies couldn't be stopped with bullets. That night, as the howls rose again, closer, sharper, a primal fear seeped into his bones. It wasn't fear of death. It was fear of being hunted, of becoming prey in a world he thought he ruled. The story of wolves isn't just about wild beasts. It's about survival, about nature's retaliation when pushed to its limits. Jake Thompson, standing in the dark with a freezing pistol in hand, didn't know he was about to face a truth no bullet could change. In the war between man and nature, humans don't always win. Paris, in 1438, was gripped by fear, like a small Texas town hearing whispers of a Bigfoot sighting. The cobblestone streets, once alive with torchlight and laughter, now lay silent, haunted by the howl of wind against icy city walls. The plague ravaged, hunger gnawed at every household, and a wolf pack, led by the monstrous Red Fang, prowled beyond the ramparts like an enemy platoon biding its time. Parisians trembled in their wooden homes, whispering of Red Fang's blazing red eyes, glowing like Jeep headlights in the night's fog. Hope was gone, replaced by despair, like realizing your pack's last MRE is the dreaded gray tuna after 3 days on the march. Amid the panic, Jake Sullivan, captain of the city guard, rose like a lighthouse in a storm. Jake wasn't the radio's dead or forgot the map kind of lieutenant. American troops mocked during long nights at Fort Bragg. A battle-hardened veteran, he bore a long scar across his left cheek, a memento from a bloody clash with the English. Tall and rugged, Jake had the build of a college linebacker who could bulldoze an entire defensive line. But behind his steely eyes was a strategist's mind, sharp as a razor. He knew saving Paris demanded more than courage. It required a bold, cunning plan, as sly as a General Patton campaign. Jake strode into the palace, facing the king with the confidence of a Navy SEAL before an impossible mission. He demanded the city be sealed for 2 weeks, a command that stunned the crowd as if he'd just banned burgers at McDonald's. No one in, no one out, not a scrap of garbage tossed over the walls. Jake aimed to starve the wolf pack, forcing them to face the same hunger nature had wielded against humanity. But that was just the start. He ordered Notre Dame's square transformed into a deadly trap. Livestock were to be slaughtered there, their blood soaking the stones, the scent of meat wafting like a massive backyard BBQ. Animal entrails were dragged from the frozen river gate to the square, strewn like red carpets leading to doom. Jake knew that to kill Red Fang, the wolf as cunning as a general, with fiery red fur and a stumped tail marking its defiance, he had to lure it with its own greed. For 10 long days, Paris waited in silence. The wolves circled beyond the walls, sniffing from afar, but Red Fang, with its razor-sharp wits, wasn't easily fooled. Pairs of glowing red eyes flickered in the forest, like beacons of a spec ops team on recon. Jake stood on the ramparts, breath turning to white mist in the frigid air, patient as a sniper awaiting a target. He sensed the tension like a platoon bracing for a final stand. At last, with patience wearing thin, Jake made a reckless call. Slaughtered 20 more healthy livestock, turning the square into an irresistible free buffet. Blood pooled, the imagined scent of roasting meat drifting through the woods. It was his final gambit, and Jake knew either the wolves would take the bait or Paris would become a graveyard. Then the moment came. On a frigid noon, with the sun hanging like a dim orb in a gray sky, hundreds of wolves surged into the city like a flood. Red Fang led, its crimson fur glinting in the faint light, eyes blazing like laser beams. They charged through the river gate, claws scraping ice, their howls echoing like a battle hymn. Jake, perched on a high rooftop, clenched his fists. The trap was set, and the prey had bitten. But a cold dread crept into his heart. Red Fang wasn't just a wolf, it was nature's wrath incarnate, and the battle ahead would be no mere hunt, but a fight for survival. Night fell over Paris like a freezing blanket, cloaking the cobblestone streets already trembling from hunger and plague. Notre Dame's square, once echoing with prayers, now reeked of fresh blood and raw meat. Jake Sullivan, captain of the city guard, stood atop a high rooftop, his steely eyes scanning the scene. He wasn't the forgot the map or radio's dead kind of Lieutenant American soldiers mocked during long nights at Fort Bragg. Jake was a warrior, a long scar across his left cheek, proof of life or death battles with the English. Tonight, his enemy wasn't human but a ferocious wolf pack led by Red Fang, a massive beast with fur blazing red as fire, eyes glowing like a Chevy's taillights in foggy gloom. Jake's plan was meticulous, like a military op crafted in a war room. He'd turned the square into a lethal trap. Livestock blood soaked the stones, animal entrails strewn like an irresistible lure. As hundreds of ravenous wolves flooded the square like a tidal wave, Jake signaled. The heavy city gate slammed shut, its metallic clang echoing like a starting gun. The pack was trapped, no escape. From rooftops, windows, and balconies, Jake's archers drew their bows, arrows slicing the frigid air like a storm. The first wolves fell, gray fur stained red, their pained howls blending with the wind. But Red Fang, swift as a Humvee tearing down I-95, darted behind the square's grand fountain, its blazing eyes scanning the chaos like a commander plotting the next move. The other wolves didn't yield easily. They snapped arrows with razor-sharp jaws, charging the archers with the ferocity of a paratrooper platoon cornered. A few archers, hands shaking like rookies gripping an M16 for the first time, were dragged from balconies, their screams swallowed by the beast's roars. Jake clenched his fists but didn't waver. He knew war's cost, whether against man or beast. If Paris was to survive, blood had to flow. The king, with his elite warriors in gleaming armor, joined the fray. They marched into the square, long spears glinting under moonlight, their resolve like the Alabama Crimson Tide before a championship game. Jake ordered the release of the hunting dogs, dozens of beasts trained like Navy SEALs, with jaws and claws honed for battle. They tore into the wolves, snarls and howls, merging into a deadly symphony. The square became a slaughterhouse, blood flowing in rivers staining the ancient stones. But Red Fang's pack was too strong. The brave dogs fell one by one, bodies torn apart. Many of Jake's warriors perished too, their cries for help drowned in the pack's fury. Jake stood on the rooftop, breath heavy, heart aching like a blade's cut. He'd lost too many, but the fight wasn't over. As the moon faded behind clouds, only Red Fang and a few surviving wolves remained, retreating into the shadows of Notre Dame's arches. They lurked in cold stone corners, eyes blazing like lasers, ready for the final stand. Jake, long spear in hand, stepped into the square. He was no longer a captain, no longer the king's soldier. He was a man, alone against nature's nightmare. The crowd on the rooftops held their breath, eyes locked on Jake's towering figure advancing into the dark. Beneath the arches, Red Fang stood defiant, its crimson fur like a fire roaring in a winter hearth. It let out a howl, a booming challenge that shook the ancient stones. Jake gripped his spear, breath turning to white mist in the icy air. He thought not of glory, not of Paris or the king. He saw only Red Fang's blazing eyes, like headlights piercing the void. With a shout, Jake charged, his spear plunging into the wolf's chest. Blood sprayed, staining Red Fang's fur. But the beast didn't fall. With its last strength, it lunged, razor-sharp jaws tearing into Jake's throat. Both collapsed, their blood mingling on the cold stone, a tragic masterpiece painted in sacrifice. Notre Dame's bells tolled, slow and somber, like a funeral hymn. The crowd counted silently. 300 wolves lay dead in the square, their bodies piled under moonlight. Paris erupted in bittersweet victory, but joy was tinged with sorrow. Jake Sullivan, the city's hero, was gone forever. Survivors recounted the battle. Red Fang, a wolf, not just a beast, but seemingly nature's wrath incarnate. The legend of Jake and Red Fang spread through generations, a chilling tale told by Montana or Wyoming campfires, where distant howls still echo from deep woods. Yet for those who witnessed the battle, a question lingered. Was Red Fang truly just a wolf, or something more? A phantom of nature roused by war and famine. As moonlight bathed Notre Dame's arches, some swore they saw a shadow, tall, black-furred, reeking of decay, glide past as if Red Fang had never truly left. In the winter of 1917, on the eastern front of World War I, the cold sliced like a razor's edge, piercing through the soldiers' coats, Russian and German alike, as if they were nothing more than old newspapers. The ground was hard as concrete, the shallow trenches mere scratches in the earth, offering little shelter from artillery shells or the howling wind tearing through the deep forest. The temperature plummeted to record lows, as if the entire northern hemisphere had been locked in a giant McDonald's freezer, where even the fries would surrender. The soldiers' morale was as grim as opening a rucksack after a 3-day march, only to find the last MRE is the dreaded gray tuna, a flavor even Marines would grimace at. Amid this brutal landscape, Mike Carter, an American military advisor from Texas, stepped into the fray. Mike, with his sun-bleached blonde hair and a grin straight out of a college football tailgate, had grown up on late-night John Wayne movies, dreaming of heroic battles. War was no stranger to him. He'd seen the smoke and dust of battlefields from the Somme to Verdun. But here, in the dark forests of Eastern Europe, Mike felt something different, an unnamed unease, like hearing a strange noise in the barracks at midnight, when your night vision goggles have run out of battery. The dense forest enveloping the front was a labyrinth of gaunt trees, their brittle branches snapping under thick snow. Between earth-shaking barrages, Mike and his platoon patrolled in silence, their breath forming white clouds in the frigid air. That night, as the moon peeked through ashen clouds, a strange sound shattered the stillness. A howl. Not the cry of a lone wolf, but hundreds of howls, blending into a chilling chorus, echoing like a death song from the forest's depths. Mike gripped his M1911, his heart pounding. He'd heard Bigfoot tales back home, but this was something far more terrifying, a living nightmare drawing closer by the second. The wolves, their hunting grounds ravaged by war, had formed a super pack, hundreds of ravenous predators, fiercer than any SS unit Mike had heard of. They didn't distinguish between Russian or German. They craved only living flesh. Starvation had turned them into killing machines, with jaws sharp as razors and eyes glowing red, blazing like the taillights of a Ford F-150 in fall. Mike sensed their presence, like a paratrooper squad lying in ambush. The snap of twigs, low growls, and dark shapes flitting through the edges of his night vision scope made the hairs on his neck stand on end. They were fast as a jeep tearing across a Nevada desert, and they were hunting. That night, the wolves attacked a German outpost just a few hundred meters from Mike's platoon. Rifle shots rang out, mingled with blood-curdling screams, as if hell itself had opened its gates. Then silence. A heavy, terrifying silence, more dreadful than any artillery barrage. Mike led his platoon toward the outpost, each step heavy as lead, his breath mingling with the stench of blood and gunpowder. When they arrived, the scene froze even a seasoned veteran like Mike. The outpost was a slaughterhouse. German soldiers lay strewn across the snow, their bodies torn apart as if a savage special forces team had swept through. Rifles littered the ground, bullets scattered, and helmets lay overturned like recruits' mess kits. Strangest of all, the wolves hadn't devoured their kills. Dozens of bodies lay untouched, blood still fresh, as if the pack had killed for the sake of mindless rage. Mike knelt beside a soldier's body, his eyes locked on a deep bite mark gouged into the man's neck. This wasn't the behavior of normal predators. Wolves kill to eat, but this pack had slaughtered far beyond need, as if driven by something beyond instinct. A chill ran down Mike's spine as he looked up, the moonlight filtering through the trees. For a fleeting moment, he swore he saw a figure, tall, black-furred, reeking of decay, standing silently in the forest. It didn't move, only stared, its eyes gleaming like laser pointers. Mike blinked and the figure was gone, leaving him to wonder if it was a trick of stress or something far more sinister lurking in the shadows of war. As the platoon retreated, the howls rose again, fading into the distance but haunting, like a warning that the wolves weren't done. Mike clutched his rifle, his heart heavy. He knew that in this place, amid the smoke and cold, humanity wasn't just fighting itself, but facing an ancient, unrelenting enemy, nature, and the mysteries it conceals. When the bells of Notre Dame tolled in the frigid night of 1438, Paris erupted in the joy of victory. 300 wolves, from ferocious predators to the monstrous Red Fang, lay dead in the city square, their blood mingling with the snow. A tragic masterpiece painted with sacrifice. But the joy was bitter, like sipping a Starbucks coffee, only to find it's gone cold. Jake Sullivan, the city's hero, had fallen, his blood soaking the cobblestones beside Red Fang. Centuries later, on the Eastern Front of 1917, Russian and German soldiers survived attacks by a super pack of wolves, but at the cost of torn comrades and memories that would never fade. Mike Carter, an American military advisor from Texas, stood in the dark forest, his M1911 cold in his hand, his eyes haunted by what he'd witnessed. Both moments, separated by centuries, left questions hanging unanswered, lingering like fog over a battlefield. Red Fang, with its fiery red fur and eyes like Chevy headlights. Was it truly just a wolf? Or was it an embodiment of nature's wrath, a warning that humanity had gone too far in ravaging the earth? In Paris, survivors whispered of a figure lurking in the cathedral's arches after the battle, tall, black-furred, reeking of decay like bodies left on the Somme. They wondered if Red Fang was a messenger of an ancient force, roused by war and famine. Hundreds of years later, on the Eastern Front, Mike Carter carried a similar haunting. His voice trembled like a rookie hearing artillery for the first time as he recounted the night the wolves attacked a German outpost. He'd seen a figure, 12 feet tall, shaggy black fur, eyes blazing like lasers in his night vision scope. It stood silently in the forest like an invisible commander directing the pack. Its stench reminded Mike of Bigfoot stories from his Texas hometown. But this was something more terrifying, as if it had stepped out of a Stephen King horror novel. His exhausted, stressed comrades dismissed it as a hallucination born of war. But Mike wasn't sure. He'd seen the soldiers' bodies torn apart not for food, but as if to satisfy a senseless fury. Wolves don't kill like that, unless driven by something beyond instinct. These stories, from Paris to the Eastern Front, are a chilling reminder that nature is neither friend nor foe. It simply exists like a vast machine operating by laws humanity has never fully grasped. When pushed to the brink, by war, famine, or human arrogance, nature strikes back, ferocious and unrelenting, like a paratrooper squad ambushed in deep woods. Red Fang and the Super Pack may have been vanquished, but the figures lurking in the shadows, the howls echoing from the forest, still send shivers down the spine. Were they mere figments of imagination or signs of a mysterious force waiting for its moment to rise? Imagine camping in Yellowstone National Park, the campfire crackling, when a howl pierces the distance. Would you shrug it off as the wind or grip your hunting knife, wondering what's stalking out there? These mysteries, like tales swapped over a meal at a small Montana diner, are worth sharing with friends. Those who love horror films, football, or just crave a glimpse into the world's shadows. Tell them of Jake Sullivan, of Mike Carter, and of the wolves that never truly vanish. And the next time you hear an odd sound in the night, listen closely. It might not just be the wind,